Do you find yourself dreaming of owning your own baking business? Then you're in the right place. Hey, I'm Lauren, the host here at the Sugar Coated Dreams podcast. I'll be your guide through this fun world where sugar, entrepreneurship, and passion all collide. So grab your cup of coffee or your glass of wine and sit back and hear stories of wonderful entrepreneurs in the baking industry. Let the laughing begin. You
Absolutely.
have tuned in to this week's episode of the Sugar Coated Dreams podcast. And man, do I have a fun guest. We've been in the background talking and laughing for about 10 minutes. And finally, I decided we probably ought to turn the record feature on.
Yes.
So, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Coach Chef Kim, who was the highlight, the highlight of CookieCon. If any of you all went, she has an amazing story and talk about inspirational, Kim. So, why don't you just introduce yourself and just tell whatever you want to tell? And I'm just going to sit back and listen because you are a great speaker.
Okay, that works. So again, as was stated, I am Coach Chef Kim. And yes, that is my full title because I am an actual coach. I'm a transformational life coach. I specialize in helping women entrepreneurs live the life of their wildest dreams, not just the life of your dreams. You must be delusional in order to work with me. So we live the life of our wildest dreams. I am a chef. I went to Le Cordon Bleu 12 years ago at this point, and had a really, really wonderful, rewarding career as a pastry chef. I had a very, very large celebrity clientele in Atlanta. And
Wow.
yeah, it was huge. And a lot of times I didn't know who they were. Like I didn't know who the people were.
Yes.
And I actually journeyed into cookies because one of my clients, she had done 3 orders, we had never met,
Mhm.
and like somebody else was always picking up for her, or I dropped it off at the venue. Like we had never met, and then her husband came home. She introduced me to him, and he was like, "Can you make cookie baskets?" And I was like, "Sure."
Yeah.
And I was, you never tell somebody that you
Right.
can't do it. I
Inside,
was
you're
like,
thinking, "No, I
absolutely.
can. I know I can. How am I going to? How am I
Yeah.
going to?"
How do I do that? I have no idea. And
Yeah.
so I remember just like sending a text message to one of my friends, and I was like, "Hey, we need to build a cookie business today." And, and she was like, "What?" And so I was like, "I don't know. I don't know any details." This man just out of the blue just asked me if I could make cookie baskets. And then he gave me his business card, and he was the CFO of the Arthur Blank Foundation, which
Wow.
is like the Atlanta Falcons, our new stadium, our hockey team, like all the things. What do you mean you're the CFO? I had no idea. I had been doing
Wow.
orders for these people for years and had no idea who they were. And within 2 weeks, we built an entire cookie business. Um, we came up with all sorts of platters and things to do. And I was like really in the thick of it. And I was like, this is it. Like I found that thing that like fuels me, and this is what we're gonna do. And I went through the process. I went through several entrepreneurship programs, like in person in Atlanta. And then the day that my business plan, all 36 pages of it, was finally approved, was the day before COVID happened.
Oh, no. Hey, I have a question before we get into
Yeah.
that because I'm curious. Whenever you would make desserts
Uh-huh.
for famous people, were you contacted by somebody, like, out of New York? Because the reason I asked that is years ago, I got a phone call from someone in New York City wanting to know if I could make them cookies, and I thought, "Do you know where I live? I live in Kentucky." And they said, "No, our client is in Kentucky." I'm like, "Okay, that sounds good to me." Well, it was for the UK women's basketball coach, and I delivered them to their home. But it was so funny because I thought, you could have just called me directly and
Yeah.
said I would have been glad to make you cookies.
I think people feel more important when someone else makes that call for them.
Yeah.
And so for me, people couldn't call me. So as approachable as I am now, I have not always been this way.
Uh-huh.
And so I was a business owner that I was like, I'm a creative. Like I'm not a people person. And I
I
live.
can't imagine that. I cannot imagine that.
It's been a journey for the last 3 years of my life to be a people person. And I was just like, no. So there was no phone number. Like there was no way for you to call me.
Okay.
So people could Google me. I was completely word of mouth. But a lot of event planners knew who I was. So that was
Okay.
kind of like my end to things, was that I did a lot of bridal shows, or and then event planners would tell each other about me. So
Right.
I was like this secret, but like within the celebrities.
That's
And so they would
awesome.
just have to like fill out the form on my website. So there
Okay.
was no calling. And then some of them would put, "Can you call me?" And then I would make my assistant call them.
Uh-huh.
I didn't want to talk to people ever. I did not want to talk. And I was just like,
Boy, times have changed, right?
they I gave out more hugs at CookieCon than I think I've given out in my entire life. I was just like, this is a lot of peopling, but it didn't drain me of energy. It was so much fun.
So talking about times changing, I totally interrupted you when you said about how this happened with your business plan the
Yeah,
day before COVID.
the day before COVID, Friday the 13th, Friday 13th, 2020, I will literally never forget it. I walked out of the office at 11:14 a.m. and my kids were in the car. And I was like, we got it. Like, this is it. We're opening the bakery. It's a thing. And then I remember in the phone call Saturday morning at like 6 a.m. and
Mhm.
it was Kroger, like the grocery store, was calling to tell me that my order pickup had been canceled. And I was like, why? Like, what do you mean? I have to teach kids. I was teaching kids at cooking school. And I was like, but like I have class at
Oh,
9 a.m. Like, what do you mean? It's been, and I had not listened to the news. I did not know what was happening. So I went
right.
to the grocery store to pick up the stuff, and the lines were out the door. And
Hmm.
I was like, what's happening? And
Right.
so it still hadn't dawned on me to like listen to the news. And I was just like, I don't know what's going on, but people are losing their minds. Maybe it's about the rain, or in Georgia, we get random snow in March.
Right.
So I figured maybe it's going to snow this weekend.
Yes.
No, had absolutely no idea. We were in the middle of a global pandemic and everything was shutting down.
Mhm.
So it was definitely interesting to go through that, where they're like, give it 2 weeks. We'll pick this up in 2 weeks. Give it 2 months. Give it 6 months. We don't really know what's going to happen.
Right.
And it definitely took 2 years. But by that point, my entire life had changed.
Right.
And that was no longer aligned. Like
Mhm.
having the bakery, like nothing in me wanted a bakery anymore. And I
Right.
was like, well, I guess we're doing something else with ourselves now.
Uh-huh.
And within that time, I had gone back to school twice. I took like an entrepreneur class at Cornell,
Mhm.
which was incredible. And on the first day of class, the lady was like, if you work a business and you get hurt, and no one else can keep running your business, you don't have a business. You have a
Mhm.
glorified hobby. And I was like, that's rude. But it started me thinking, like, well, what would happen if, God forbid, I ever get hurt and can't do
Right.
my business? And so that's when I started diversifying my income. That happened really quickly. Like, we didn't have to think about it.
Yes.
And I was like, let me figure out something else. So I started looking into photography. And that's when I learned that you could like sell recipes to bloggers. And I was like, this is weird. I didn't know this was a thing. And 2 months after the lady, she said this, and this happened right around my 40th birthday, almost 3 years ago.
Mhm.
So because my birthday is tomorrow. So
Oh, well,
so this
happy
was
birthday.
thank you. This was right at my 40th birthday when this lady says this. And 2 months later, was when I ended up in a doctor's office and she told me to close my business immediately
I
because
couldn't believe,
I,
yes, when you said
that
that.
it blew my entire mind to like wake up Thanksgiving morning and to feel perfectly fine. And by the
Mhm,
time my turkey was done, like just in that, what, 4 to 5 hours of
mhm.
cooking the turkey, my body stopped working. Like my hands didn't work. I couldn't turn a doorknob. I couldn't dress myself. Like my kids had to help me get undressed that night. And I still had a wedding to do that weekend. I had an order for the Real Housewives of Atlanta. I was like, I still have to work.
That must have been
What are we
so
doing?
incredibly scary.
It was terrifying. I think the biggest piece for me was it was one of those things where people were like, "You're being dramatic." And I was like, I'm really
No,
not being, literally cannot open a door. And that was, how you have those moments in life where you're like, okay, I understand who's in my life and who won't be in my life going forward.
right,
And that was a
right.
hard stop for me. Anyone who was kind of like, are you sure? You can't be,
Yes,
they're no longer in my life. So
right.
I was,
You're out.
yeah, I was like, no, because I'm like legit hurting. Well, I wasn't even
Yes.
hurting. I didn't feel anything. It was almost like I was just numb. And I was like, well, these people don't need to be in my life anymore. So we let them go. And throughout the process of physical therapy for 7 months,
Mhm,
and then I also went to therapy because I decided we were getting a divorce during that same period. And so to go through physical therapy as well as therapy
mhm.
and get divorced, and now I have to figure out what my next career is going to be all at one time.
That's a lot.
That's a lot, but it was
Yes.
also the most profitable time of my life. Like, I made $30,000 in the first 90 days of 2021 and was like, what's happening? Like, what is this?
You know, Kim, don't you think shakeups are never fun
They're not.
when you're experiencing the shakeup,
Yeah.
but sometimes the fruit that they can bear is incredible
It's
because you
incredible.
have no choice but
Yep.
to do what you've wanted to do out of necessity, and not that we
Yeah.
what you went through was worth that or what anybody goes through, but I think it's not fun. Fun isn't the right word, but sometimes when you look back on your difficult times in life, you have a little bit of appreciation for a little bit
Oh,
of it
oh yeah,
because it makes you into the person that you are today.
absolutely. Yeah, like I am overly grateful for the entire process. And I'm like, I don't know, like I'm an only child. And so I'm like the kid that everybody was kind of like, you get whatever you want, like all the time. Like I grew up with that type of thing.
Uh-huh.
And so my mother is always like, you're really hard headed. And like you have to learn hard lessons.
Me
And I
too.
was like, this was probably the hardest lesson I ever had to learn in my life. However, it changed everything about me fundamentally. So like when I say I was not a people person, I was not a people person. Like I
Mhm.
don't want you talking to me like I would put on Chef Kimmy Who because that was my stage name pre-COVID. I would put
Uh-huh.
it on at a conference and I knew how to like fake it
Right.
essentially. And but I would always be depleted of energy at the
Mhm.
end of the day. Like I would just be like, ugh, like that was a lie. Or if I
Right.
knew if they were like, when you deliver this cake, be camera ready. And I'm like, great, so now I have to be fake on TV. Okay,
Yeah.
cool, got it. But I would always need to like sleep like a really long time afterwards.
Mhm.
And going through this process completely made me change how I look at life. So I'm not doing anything I don't want to do, which is why, there's the reel that's like, how do you do all the things you want to do? If it's not a hell yes, it's a no.
Right.
Once I adopted this policy, that means everything that I say yes to is something I want to do. So there is no depletion. Like
Right.
at the end of Cookie Con, was I tired? Of course, I had to stand up on my feet for
Right.
8, 9 hours that day. But
Right.
I still wasn't I wasn't drained. Like I was
Right.
still full of energy, my feet were hurting, but I was like, this is so cool. And if I can like figure out how to make this my life, then this is what I'm gonna do. Like
Right.
this is this is the career path that I think I want to have now.
Right.
And my daughter was looking at me like, who are you?
Well,
Like
my favorite thing, Kim, during your speech, besides listening to you because it was just fantastic, was watching your daughter and watching the reaction that she had was priceless. I loved
yeah.
it.
Yeah, and she's both of my kids typically go everywhere with me, but my son is getting ready to open a show next week, so he's in Boston. But they're just kind of like, you do this all the time. They're just like not really impressed with me. And this time when they were talking about it, like he's like, "Give me the play-by-play. What happened today?" And she's like, "Mommy's a different person." I she was like hugging people and like taking pictures and like she wasn't like get these people away from me, nothing. And I
That's
was like,
awesome. You
it
were in your
was
element.
I was, and it didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like I had to put on for
Right.
people. Like I just showed up in myself.
Yes.
And honestly, it wasn't on purpose. I think that because Thursday night, I didn't get the memo that I was going to have to be on the stage in front of everybody
Uh-huh.
Thursday night. And I like literally, like, we drove in Thursday. And once I got there, it was like on the ground running. Like,
Mhm.
they were like, meet us in this room in 15 minutes. There's things you have to do. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, well, I'm gonna go take a nap. I'm gonna take a shower, and then I'm gonna come downstairs for opening. And I was in sweatpants and a t-shirt. Every
No
other
one
teacher
ca
was
I
like,
don't even
yeah,
remember that. I don't even remember that, so
nobody. I don't know that anybody else was paying attention other than me because I was like, I literally have a dress in my room right now.
right.
Like I really I could have just spruced it up a little bit. But
Yeah.
as they read my bio,
It was
the
impressive, Kim.
the
I
way
mean,
people
wow.
I was watching the faces of people in the audience, and it was almost like this whole wave of people went, "Whoa." And I was like, in this moment, it doesn't matter that I'm the only person on this stage in sweatpants and a t-shirt.
That's
Like,
right.
no, it doesn't matter. Like, it
Right.
literally doesn't matter because now people understand that my value is not wrapped up in the outward appearance.
That's right.
And that was like one because I was feeling really self-conscious going up on the stage. And then once people's faces were like, whoa, I was like, oh, okay, well, we're not gonna be self-conscious about this. And
Right.
I said the same thing Friday morning. Like I wrote my presentation at 7 a.m. and the first class was at 9.
Good for you.
I hadn't planned it out. I was like, whatever happens, happens. And
Right.
each class was a little different. So like depending on like, everybody has a different story from their class. And I was like, so if I'm just me, it's
Yes.
enough.
That's why I said good for you because I think sometimes if you're so over prepared for things, it comes off as not being genuine. And
Yeah.
if you for me anyway, if I'm more off the cuff, then it's me.
Right.
And
Right.
so I never prepare like I should, quite honestly. But then people get me. They don't get this written out script that I've done.
Exactly. And then I was like, and I said, and I don't want to get bored because I
Right.
knew I had to repeat this presentation 6 times. I think we
Right.
did it 6 times. And I was like, I don't want to get bored. And I was like, by the end of the day, I don't want people to be like, because I know at one point I said, did I tell y'all this story? And people were like, no. And I was like, maybe that was the last class. Okay, so here's the story. Because then you're like, I've said this 6 times.
Right.
What have I said and what haven't I said? And
Yes.
so I was like, okay, how do we make sure this works? And I just put pictures in my presentation, and I knew the pictures would spark the stories.
Yes.
So
So
that was like the easiest way for me to deliver.
So talking about stories, Kim, I want to know how you very first were interested in baking. Was your mom a baker? Was your grandmother? How did that come about that you even went to culinary school?
Yeah, so I think culinary school was definitely a shock. But I come from a family of bakers,
Mhm.
cookers. Like everybody in my family can hold their own in the kitchen. My
Okay.
grandmother was definitely like the favorite. like at church, like Christmas time. Oh my God. At Christmas, people just knew my grandmother was going to have a pound cake. It does not matter when you went to visit her, there was a fresh pound cake in her house.
Yum.
Ma'am, how many pound cakes did you make a week? We still don't know. But like whenever people would just drop by, there was always pound cake. And then during Christmas, she had a cookie that she made. She was the head of the cafeteria at an elementary school here.
Oh.
And every Christmas, these kids got what was called a Grove Park cookie.
Uh-huh.
And when my grandmother passed, I think that was the year I turned 18 or 19. I was the only person, like, I'm the one who did the recipe for Christmas. And so
Oh,
even though all of the grandkids, I'm also the oldest granddaughter. There are
okay.
5 boys ahead of me, and then I was the first girl, so naturally, I was in the kitchen.
Right.
Um, I made this cookie and nobody else could get it right. Like nobody else could get it. And so
Uh-huh.
that became my thing. So now I'm the one who has to make this cookie every Christmas,
That's
only during Christmas,
that's
no
so
other time.
special.
It is, and I don't sell it. I never sold it. So even through the 10 years that I was running a bakery, I never sold it. It would always just be a gift, or it would be like, here's a treat or whatever. And people were like, why don't you, like, this is delicious. Why are you not selling it? And I said, because my grandmother never sold it. She made thousands every Christmas and just gave it away. And
That's so
so that
nice.
is how the business itself started. So it was during Christmas. Um, and my children, I think between the two of them that year, they had like 13 teachers. And I was like, who can afford to get 13 teacher gifts? Like,
Right.
how is this going to work? And so I was like, well, I can
Cookie.
spend like, $30 on some supplies and make stuff. And I
Right.
did. So every teacher got a platter of cookies, a variety of them, brownies, little things, slices of cake. And that was just their gift. And then when we got back to school, they were like, how do we place an order? And I was like, for what? And they were like, that tray that I took home for Christmas break, people, they loved it. How do I buy this from you? And I was like, I don't have a business. I don't know. And my mother was like, I guess you need to have a business. And so that's when I started going through the process of learning all the things. And I took wilting classes first.
Uh-huh.
And then I was like, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And I
Right.
had a dream. I was in a little cordon bleu commercial. And the next day I went and enrolled. It was
I
just that simple.
am you are my kind of person. That's exactly how I am. I
Yeah,
decide I'm gonna do something, and the next
that's
day
it.
I do it.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
hard-headed, like you said you were stubborn.
yeah,
And didn't you say you were stubborn?
yeah. I still am.
Yeah, me
Yeah,
too. And so when I set my mind to do something, I just do it.
that's it. Yeah, and like I found I saw the email I sent to my mother letting her know that I was going to culinary school yesterday. I was like, "Mommy, look at how I told you I was going to culinary school." It wasn't even like I'm asking your thoughts and your opinions. I was like, "Hey, listen, so I had a dream that I was in the Le Cordon Bleu commercial last night, and so I went to the school. No, it was 2 weeks later. I was telling her that school was getting ready to start. I had already enrolled. I already had my books. I already had the uniform. I was like, by the way, I'm going to be a pastry chef. And my mother was like, what? This is who we are. So now she doesn't ask.
That
It,
sounds like heaven to me. I mean, if I were younger, and I'm not that old, but I don't know if I have it in me to go to school again. But man, would I love to go to culinary school? I've thought about it so many times just for the fun of it. I just think it would be fun.
yeah, it was definitely fun. It taught me, man, I do learn hard lessons. It taught me lessons. I went into a final exam when I couldn't stand up, and like I physically could not stand up, and my sciatic nerve had just gone
Oh,
left. And
mhm.
my chef was looking at me and he was like, "Can you stand up?" And I was like, "I am standing." And he was like,
No,
"I
you're
need
not.
you to go straight to somebody's emergency room." And I said, "I can't. It's finals day. I have to do this final." And so I did the final. I got one thing wrong. I was super pissed. I got a 99. And then he was like, "Please go to the emergency room." And they put me on bed rest for 6 weeks.
Is that
They
right?
were like, "What are you doing?" They're like, "What do you do? What do you mean your teacher sent you here?" I was like, he said I shouldn't be bent over like this. So can you like give me something to fix it?" And they were like, "Yeah, bed rest." And I was like, "Well, that's not gonna work because now I'm in my last quarter of culinary school." And so they gave me very strict instructions of like having to sit down in
Mhm.
the kitchen. That
Not
was
easy.
it was a feat, but we did it. Like everybody in my class was like, "If you're gonna do this, we're gonna help you." And so they would bring stuff to me. They were measuring out stuff.
Oh.
It was the greatest thing. And then by the time that 6 weeks was over, I could walk again. But yep, I sat down in the kitchen for the last 6 weeks of culinary school.
So tell everybody, Kim, all the degrees that you have, because you have a bunch of them.
I do have a lot of them. It's a problem. Okay, so let's see if I can remember them all. I have an undergraduate degree in organizational development. And then I became an event planner, so I have an event planning certification. And then I realized I didn't actually like planning events, but I like making stuff for it. So then that's when I
Uh-huh.
went to culinary school. Then I got a master's degree in education because I knew I wanted to write a textbook. And
Mhm.
because I was working with kids, one of the things I noticed was there were not baking textbooks. So I was like, well, I'm gonna get a degree in education and then maybe that'll teach me how to do it. It did not. Um
Hey,
so
you're young, Kim. I see that in your future.
it's well, I've already written the book, so I wrote the book and published it 2 years ago.
Oh, I didn't realize
But
that.
yeah, teach me how to bake. It is on shelves. So I did write the
Oh, I
textbook.
didn't know that because of those beautiful pictures you were in
Yes.
the
So
I had
the
forgotten.
photography. Yeah.
Yes.
So that was once I like had the education under my belt, like, okay, here's how you do curriculum. Then I was like, so I learned how to do online curriculum. It wasn't
Uh-huh.
teaching me how to write a book. And I was like, well, that's not cool. So I started an online academy. So Teach Me How to Bake was an online academy originally. And then I was like, but I want a physical book. So how do I make this a book? So I took a couple of classes on learning how to make it a book. Um, but then that's when I learned photographers charge a lot of money for that. So I learned how to do photography. So I spent $10,000 learning photography. And then
You're my hero. You're
it's,
amazing.
I'm always looking for a way to get through things. And so I published that book. That was cool. That was fun. And then I was like, the doctors at this point, we now know like the degenerative disc are in my neck and my hands don't work. But they
Right.
couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. So even
Mhm.
though all these like great things were happening, I was like, physically, we still don't know what's wrong. And that's when I was like, I want to do something different. So people were like, "You're so inspiring. You should like be a coach or something." And I was like,
Okay.
"Is there a program for that?" So I Googled it and there was.
I love that. Is there a program for that?
If I'm gonna do it, I have to be the best. So there was a program for it. And so I was enrolling in the school to get a doctorate degree in transformational leadership and coaching. But
Wow.
the requirement of the school was I needed a master's degree from them. And so they put me in a master's program of transformational leadership and coaching. So I spent a year in that, and then the school closed. And I was like, what in the world? What are we going to do? And so I went on a TikTok rabbit hole one night where this girl was talking about hypnosis
Uh-huh.
and how you can use hypnosis with coaching. And I was like, that's interesting. And so I just like Googled her and I was like, look, and she said she went to the school called Saybrook University. So I clicked it. And so now I'm enrolled at Saybrook getting a PhD in mind body medicine so that my coaching practice won't just be, yes, I have textbook knowledge of coaching, but one of the things that I realized was a lot of people have a lot of limiting beliefs. And I was
Mhm.
like, how do I help you through that?
Right.
And hypnosis is one of the ways you can do it. So when I was looking at the programs, mind body medicine is literally how do you use your mind and your body to heal yourself.
Uh-huh.
So there's nutrition, there's hypnosis, there's psychedelics. It's literally a degree for alternative medicine. So
Uh-huh.
now I'm getting a PhD in mind body medicine. And at some
So
point it's all
awesome.
gonna come together. I don't know how, but it's kind of fun on the journey. It is fun on the journey. So everything that I talk about, everything mindset wise, everything mindfulness wise, is all backed by science. I'm
Mhm.
like, I've clearly written a paper on it before I even open my mouth on it, which
Yes.
is why I think people like me,
Mhm.
because you can tell I'm really smart, but I don't talk like I'm really smart, if that makes sense. So it's not like,
Well, you're down to earth, you're approachable.
yeah, and I'm like, "Okay, so why don't we just try this? And
Yes.
you tell me if that makes you feel better." And then people are like, "Oh my god, that helped." And I'm like, "Good."
Well, you
Follow
know
that.
what I think? You know how I think it can come together, Kim?
How?
You're such an entrepreneur, and most cookie decorators and, bakers are entrepreneurs, and we all suffer from imposter syndrome. I mean, all of us.
Yes.
We think, I mean, we compare ourselves to each other. We don't think that we're good enough. We
Yeah.
every one of us does it. I was there's a very prominent chef in my little town well, in the state of Kentucky. And she is the nicest person ever. And when I first met her, I was so intimidated. Not that she was intimidating, she is so
Yeah.
kind and so nice, but I was just so intimidated. And I mentioned to her, in this meek little voice, although I'm never really meek, that because let me back up. She and I were both invited on this culinary tour as
Mhm.
the celebrity guests. And I
Yes.
thought, how am I I was on the Food Network, but how would I be a celebrity guest along with this person who is
Yeah.
definitely a cooking celebrity? So I mentioned to her, "Oh, I was on the Christmas cookie challenge, and if you ever want me to teach cooking classes or cookie decorating classes in one of your shops, I would love to do that." And she was so kind. And so I was telling my sister-in-law after the fact, I said, "Gosh, I was a nervous wreck meeting her." She said, "Lauren, you're one of the most accomplished people that I know." And I thought, I am. I am
Yeah.
accomplished, but I don't think of not that I don't have self-confidence and things like that, but,
Yes.
when you're at home pretty much by yourself
Yep.
doing your own thing, you compare yourself against everybody that you see
Yes.
on social media.
Yes.
So, we all have problems. We all have problems with that, no matter how accomplished or what we've done.
Yep.
Um, so you can help people like me.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned imposter syndrome. That's literally the latest blog on my blog. Is imposter
Really?
syndrome. And I'm also on Newsbreak, so I syndicate my blog posts on Newsbreak, and of course it went
What
viral.
is Newsbreak? I don't know what Newsbreak is.
Newsbreak is there's an app for it. It's kind of like I'm trying to think what else pops up on my phone, like New York Times, the way they like pop up with like breaking stories.
Yes.
Newsbreak does the same thing. And so on Newsbreak, like it's really just a bigger search engine if people are looking for something specific. So
Oh,
I write a lot in the business entrepreneurship mindset realm.
oh,
Mostly
that's
everything that I
cool.
put on Newsbreak is in that. So naturally imposter syndrome went viral.
Yes.
And I talk about it a lot without calling it imposter syndrome. This is the first time I actually use those words, but
Uh-huh.
I talk about imposter syndrome all the time. And when people are like, "Well, you don't ever seem like you're nervous about anything," and I was like, "For what?" And I was like, "People put on their pants one leg at a time, just like I do." And I was
Right.
like, "Yes, some people are more accomplished than me, maybe." Maybe. I got a whole lot of degrees.
I doubt it.
So,
I doubt it, Kim.
it's one of those type of things, and I was like I said, I don't compare myself against other people. I
Right.
compare myself against myself.
Yes, that's me. I think that's what I do more. Compare
Yeah,
myself. I have high expectations of myself.
I do too. Yeah, that's a trauma response. Yeah, it's okay. We can talk about that later. But that is definitely a growing up in the 80s and 90s thing. Like
Uh-huh.
our generation, this is how they raised us, right? That we
Right.
have to have all this education. But am I telling my kids to go to college? Absolutely not, because you don't
Yeah.
have to. And
Right.
it's one of those things where prove it wrong. Like as a Virgo, we are naturally like Google it. like I'm always right, right? Like I'm not gonna say something unless I know 100% that I'm right. And
Right.
so I'm like, I use that to my advantage. So imposter syndrome is no different for me. If I'm like, man, I don't deserve to be here, I'm gonna run down my resume in my head. And
Yes.
then I'm gonna be like, child, not only do you deserve to be here, you should be higher up in the ranks than you are.
Right.
And
Yes.
that's like even the first time I taught at CookieCon, this year was number 2. Last year when I taught at CookieCon, I never saw any of the other teachers at all. Like
Uh-huh.
there was very little me interacting with other people. And
Right.
so this year I was like, "Oh my god, my face is all over this stuff with all these people who've been on Food Network and no
Yes.
one knows who I am and what's going to happen and like is this going to be a thing?" And then I was like, "Girl, people just don't know who you are yet."
Right.
And that was literally like the way I had to walk into CookieCon,
Yes.
because if you look at my social media following compared to their social media following, not the same, but then I had the best class.
You
So it was
did.
like, it was one of those things where I was just like, I'm just kind of in my own little world. Like
Yes.
I don't really dabble in what other people are doing. I think that's the only child thing too,
Yeah.
where I'm just very used to like being me and not really worrying about what other people do. I think the other piece of this is I homeschooled my kids for a decade.
Uh-huh.
And so I didn't have the comparison of where my kids were to other kids or other moms. Like we haven't lived in that world.
Yes.
And so for us, like even my kids, they're just like, why would I compare myself to other people? And I'm like, that is such a homeschool trait that you're just like,
I homeschooled my kids too.
I think, yeah, it's a different world and you have a different outlook on life.
You
And
do. I
yeah,
didn't do it for a long time. I did it for, well, I homeschooled for 4 years, and then I sent them to a, semi-homeschool where they went to school a couple days and they were home a couple days, and man, that was hard, but it was such a blessing to be able to spend that much time with my kids.
yes.
Oh, because they're with you for such a short amount of time. And I look back at all the fun we had and all the crazy things we did and the
So,
experiments and the field trips. And
yep.
man, I wouldn't change that at all.
Me either. And that's how, and it spilled over into like at this point of my life, I'm like, my oldest is 21, my youngest is about to be 18.
Mine
And so,
too. Exactly the same.
so now it's like, what are you doing for you? Like this is
Yes.
your season now. Like what are you gonna do for yourself? And so CookieCon was like, I was like, oh, I'm gonna go teach at this conference. It'll be cool.
Yes.
And then like my whole life changed. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, so this is different. This is not you just taught a class. This was you've changed lives. Like my
Right.
DMs have been full since I left CookieCon. And I was like, okay. My mother was like, all this from a photography class.
Oh, it was more than a photography class,
I said
Kim.
they learned photography, but they also met me. And then my mother
Yes.
was like, "Okay, I get it."
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. Yeah,
yeah,
just like the chef that I was talking about, she did ask me if I wanna do a class in this event. It's not really, it's like a cooking, I don't know how to explain it. It's like the old-fashioned Food Network where you would go in and you would sit and you would watch
it
someone
worked.
and you would
Yeah.
listen to their stories and you would drink and eat.
Yes.
So fun. Well, she opened one of those in our town, and so she asked me to teach a cookie class with her, and it's sold out super quick, 2 classes, and I thought, "Okay, okay, I can feel good about
Yeah,
myself,"
yeah,
because and just to be associated with somebody of that caliber is
yes.
really a thrill.
Yeah, I love that. I love everything about that, and that was sparking some things in my brain, and I'm like, "I'm gonna have to go research something when we get off this and see how I can make that happen in Atlanta," because yes.
It's fun. I mean, it's really cool. She sells out the minute she puts a class out. I mean, I'm not kidding you. Within an hour, they're all sold out because there's just not that kind of opportunity. There, not that many people do that kind of thing anymore.
Well,
And
that
I think especially after the pandemic,
Yep.
because it's not that far after. People are still just yearning to get
Yeah.
together and experiences. And, I'd
Mhm.
rather spend money on experiences than anything else.
Absolutely.
This podcast is brought to you by the Cheerful Box. The Cheerful Box is a monthly cookie decorating subscription that brings joy and creativity right to your doorstep. Inside, you'll find a unique collection of cookie cutters, a stencil, clip art, and a step-by-step tutorial on how to decorate all of the cookies that you can make with the cookie cutters in the box. It's the perfect way to indulge in your passion for baking and take your skills to new heights. So after you listen to the episode, be sure and check out the Cheerful Box. Don't miss out on this opportunity to receive a monthly dose of baking magic delivered right to your doorstep. So visit our website and check it out today. Now let's get back to our podcast.
And that's one of the pieces that was one of like the hardcore pieces in the life coaching training. I'm not gonna call it
Uh-huh.
life coaching. It was transformation coaching,
Uh-huh.
but it changed your life.
Right.
And they were like, our weekly homework required us to have interaction with other people, whether
Uh-huh.
it was, your parents, your kids, like somebody, it didn't matter. And I was like, I don't like people. Like, I don't want to do this. But because there was like such hardcore, like, this is your homework assignment and we have
Uh-huh.
to do this. And we had to have hard conversations and we had to have community. And I was like, why? And they were like, humans were not designed to live alone. And I
Right.
was like, but I'm doing very well living alone. And they were like, your life could be so much more robust if you weren't alone. And I
Yeah.
was like, I don't really know if I believe this. And my daughter ended up in the hospital for 18 days while this was happening. And I
Mhm.
was like, we were supposed to be there for 3. That was it. It was a planned surgery. They were like, "You'll be home in 3 days, 5 at the max." No, we were there for 18.
Gosh.
And the way the nurses would come in before their shift, on their lunch break, after their shift, they needed life coaching. And they would all tell me all their problems. And I
Uh-huh.
was like, "What is happening?" And
God was putting those people in your life,
he
Kim, so that you would
was.
know what direction you needed to go
It
into
was
next.
mind blowing
Uh-huh.
what was happening. And I was like, okay, so I think I'm supposed to like do this for real because how we like, we moved into the whole PhD and all that stuff. But when the nurses would tell my parents, like when my parents came to visit, and they were like, "Your daughter has just like literally changed this entire floor," and my
Wow.
mother is like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Nothing." Like they come have a conversation and we just talk, and it was like, oh, when you let down the mask and you're just yourself,
Yes.
people aren't draining your energy. You
Right.
are inspiring people without trying to inspire them.
Yes.
And because I don't focus on, like, once I learned the redemptive narrative, like, yes, something bad might have happened, but here's everything that followed. Like, here's all the good stuff. When you take control of your story and you can tell it to other people, then
Yes.
people are inspired.
You
And
know
I
what I say all the time, and I believe this 100%. I believe that God has given us all a gift. And when you are living in that gift, you are going
Mhm.
to be successful. What does successful mean? For me, it means if I can help one person have a happier life, then that's what
Yeah,
success is for me. And that's
yeah,
why I'm doing this podcast, because I want people to hear stories and think, man, I can do it. If she can do it, if he can do it, I can do
yeah,
it. So
absolutely.
what kind of advice would you give if someone were listening that is baking at home and thinks, "Man, I want to start my own something." What would you tell them? First of all, they need to get in your coaching group.
Yes. So we have a open Facebook group. Like you can hop in there and chit chat with us. And I'll definitely give you the link. You can put it in your show notes and all
I
that goodness.
will.
But then there's also the Empower Entrepreneur Academy. It has 2 levels. So the first level is $7 a month. That's it. And it teaches people. This is definitely when I created it, it was for like the overworked mom. or
Mhm.
the out touched mom. Like you have little kids at home, they keep touching you. And I'm like, you're out touched, dude. Like, not like you're like out of touch, but like
Yeah.
literally people are always touching you. And like, how do you find that time to yourself? Because
Right.
I didn't know how to do that when my kids were younger. And
Mhm.
so now that I have the training to kind of guide people through mindfulness practices, that's where the $7 membership came from. And then my weekly coaching, which today is Wednesday, we meet tonight. In that program, that was $97 a month. And that is literally women who had sweets businesses and they were like, I want to do something else. I don't know how to transition. I don't know, like, how do I start teaching? How do we do this? Like, you've done all the things. What if I don't want to go back to school to learn how to be a teacher? How do you do that? And I'm like, well, I've already created curriculum.
That's
So
awesome. You're
use,
changing
use the
people's lives.
use the curriculum. Yeah, I'm very much so. I feel like Olivia Pope. Like I'm very much so a problem solver, like without all the drama. And
Uh-huh.
so when people are like, I'm stuck, I'm overwhelmed, I don't know what to do, you cannot say that to me because I
Mhm.
want to fix you. I want to fix your problems right now. And
Uh-huh.
so that to me is like, I don't know, it's like the fun of my life where
Yes.
I'm gonna fix you. Like you can't tell me why are you stuck? What has you stuck? What is it? And when
Yes.
people can get it out and then I go, oh, well do this, this, and it. And they're like, how did you do that? Because I'm not emotionally attached to it.
Right.
And
Yes.
so for people who are like, well, I want to do it, but I can't do it, the thing that got me to this point was I understood if I was doing something for my children couldn't be the reason why I couldn't do it. So if I'm starting this business for my family, then my family can't be in the way of me being successful.
Right.
So these two things, and that's what happens most time. People are like, "Well, I'm doing this so I can give my kids a better life." And I'm like, "Okay, great. So why don't we have a website?" Well, because my kids' schedules are too much. That's not a
Good
good
point.
excuse. Yeah, it's
Right.
you can't blame the thing that you're doing it for. That's the same reason you can't get stuff done. And
Yes.
once I realized people were doing that and I realized I was doing that, I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, no, 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 no. This is the problem." Like
Yeah.
the reason you're doing it is also the reason you're not doing it.
Right.
You have to make this work. So that is how, for me, it made sense that my excuses were not valid.
Right.
Because that meant, can your neighbor pick your kid up? Like,
Right.
do you have to be at everything? And I was the mom who had to be at everything. So
Yeah.
if I had to be at everything, then that meant I had to stay up later, or
Right.
we weren't going on a field trip, or something like that. Something else had to happen if whatever was the most important thing to me, like once you prioritize it, some stuff is busy work.
Yeah.
Prioritize what's important. Go to the kids' game. You don't have to be at every practice.
Right.
You're not
So
missing anything from the practice.
tell
Yeah.
me about your podcast.
My podcast is called The Positive Voice. I love it because it allows me to be the positive voice in people's minds when they cannot replace the limiting beliefs in their head. I
That's
love it.
wonderful.
Yeah,
That's
it's so
wonderful. People
fun.
need that.
They do. That was the one piece that was missing in my coaching program where I just kept saying, choose a new thought. And they were like, if you tell us to choose a new thought one more time. And I was like, but it's really that simple. And for a lot of people, it's just not that simple to choose a new
Right.
thought. And
Uh-huh.
I went, well, they all listen to my podcast every week. So what if I just tell them what they need to hear in the podcast?
Uh-huh.
And so then it became the positive voice and it took off once it was the visionary catalyst. And then I was like, I'm going to rebrand this.
Mhm.
When I started the PhD program, I was like, we're going to rebrand and now I'm just going to give you positivity. I thought it was going to be very zen, like, you know,
Mhm.
you're going to hear water in the background. That is not what happened because that is not who I am. But I
Yeah.
thought that's what it was going to be originally. I was like, I'm going to make a very zen podcast. It is not. It is
Uh-huh.
not zen. It's fun, but it's not zen. Um, unless it specifically states this is a mindfulness, like guided something or another.
Uh-huh.
It's fun and it's a way for me to have like conversation like we're best friends.
This is the podcasting is my favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely, because you get to reach into people's hearts and minds, and I get to talk to great people like you, and man, it's fun.
It is fun. And I don't have people on my podcast. My son told me that was weird. And I was like, but I talk for an hour by myself.
Good
So
for you. I
other
couldn't do
people,
that.
that's what he said. He was like, but like I was like, if I had a guest, it would be like a 2 hour long podcast.
Yeah.
Like, we'd be there forever. So we were playing with the idea of a YouTube podcast, like a live one where people
Uh-huh.
come on, and then it's however long it is. So
Yeah.
we'll
Well,
see.
you'll do it. It'll be up there tomorrow. We'll go on YouTube, and there it'll be.
Tomorrow's my birthday. Anything is possible. I launch something on my birthday every year. I don't think it's gonna be this, but who knows? I could get inspired tonight and be like, you know what? Let me call some friends over and let's have a birthday party tomorrow and be live on YouTube.
I think
Anything
it's
is
a good
possible.
idea. I think it's a great idea.
It feels like it. I don't know if I'm ready to put the effort into it yet. We will see. That could
Yeah.
change. It could literally change in the next 12 hours. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
because it's still early in the day.
it is. I could be like, oh, that was a really great idea. We should do this. You will get first dibs if I decide to do that. I'll let you know first. It'll be breaking news.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
I am so thrilled that I met you. You are just so much fun to talk to, and thank you for coming on, and thank you for being so willing to change our times around, and for anybody listening, look at the show notes because I'll pop all of Coach Chef Kim's many wonderful activities in there.
They're all there. They all make sense. We can fix your life. That's what we can do.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Okay, well, did you hear my dog? My dog's like, time to go outside, so I better hang
They
up.
did good. They waited. They did
did.
good.
They're good.
Yeah.
Okay, Kim, so good to talk to you. I'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the Sugar Coated Dreams podcast on your favorite podcast app. Also, please take a moment to rate and review this podcast. That way, all your friends will be able to find it too. A new episode will be released every Thursday. Until then, remember to keep dreaming big and never underestimate the power of a little sugar and a lot of passion. I'm Lauren, the Cheerful Baker, and your host here at the Sugar Coated Dreams podcast.